everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curlis.
And welcome to The Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Oh, we've got a good one this week. We've got a Latin percussion ensemble from Cuba.
Okay.
And the thing about this percussion ensemble is that they don't use any percussion instruments.
Okay. Tell me a little bit more about
Well, it's a little bit of a trick there in that it's an a cappella group, so no instruments. These gentlemen from Cuba all went to music school, and they studied music, and many of them know how to play different instruments and percussion of the music of Cuba, and they decided as a little game to form a group and sing lots of songs that are in the styles of the music they grew up with, and they call themselves Vocal Sampling.
Oh, yeah, they're classic. I heard one of their songs as a part of a sampler that I got. There was a CD that I had received sometime in, I don't know, the late 90s or so that had a track from them on it. So familiar with the group. What are we listening to?
This one is called Montuno Sampling. It's a bit of a calling card for the group.
Okay. Well, before we pause, can you remind all of us how we should be listening to music as members of the Musicians Loop community?
Well, as always, we love having you listen to us whenever and wherever you choose to. So thank you so much for hanging out with us. If you are able to take a moment and improve your listening situation in any way, do that now. Just take a moment and move to the better speakers or the better room or a little bit of quiet or the better headphones. Whatever way you can improve your listening situation, that's just something we really love to try to do here. So do that if you can. If not, no worries. Keep on your run or your walk or your drive and just stay with us and check out the song.
Okay, so with that, we're going to take a pause. We'll leave links to the song in our show notes. So pause the stream, listen to the song once, twice, 3 times more, and we will be right back. And we are back. Holy cows, that was amazing.
Pretty cool, right?
Yeah, I'd love to understand why you chose this song.
It's no secret the roots and the experiences in the a cappella idiom that we bring to this one. So I think we've purposely tried not to be just a bunch of a cappella songs that we deal with. And when we do, it's solo like Bob McFerrin or with some other legend like Take Six with Johnny Mathis. Those are really our a cappella offerings so far. We could do an entire podcast and it would be only those things, but I don't want to do that. I just thought this was really different enough, wanted people to hear this. It's just so well recorded. They're so good at what they do. Even though I've heard this for a long time, I've seen them live and in person in concert, and it's still kind of amazing their ability to have the constant rhythm track, I use in air quotes, happening while they're singing all these parts. Obviously, on this recording, as we've mentioned before, you could do anything. They could record all of those individual little percussion parts and then sing all the parts separately. And they probably did that because it's really clean and easy to mix. But live and in concert, I'm telling you, it sounds like that. It sounds just like that. You're like, wait, where are the other people? Are they using a track? What's going on? Like we've talked about before, right away you're identifying, okay, wait, what is this about? Who's doing what? There's 6 of them. Who is singing? Okay, that's the lead. Oh, that's the bass. Wait, there's all these. So it's orchestrated much like a percussion ensemble where every individual little rhythm is its own thing and fairly simple and basic for one person to do. But when constructed together, it has this big rhythmic feel. So the writer-arranger is writing a big rhythmic feel more complex rhythmic pattern, but then separating it out into each woodblock, clave, shaker, a tambourine, whatever is needed. So the last little tidbit I'll tell you about seeing them live was amazing. The clave, which of course is a physical two pieces of wood that clank together to make a sound there, those are called clave, those pieces of wood. But the rhythm itself is called clave, either
Mm.
demonstrated with 2 versus 3 or 3 versus 2. So either bop, 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 or bop, 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 bop. That's the
Mhm.
basic rhythm of a lot of Latin music. That's kind of the backbeat, if you will. So it's like,
Right.
is this a 2-3 or a 3-2? And of course, there are a bunch of variations. And I just sounded like I knew a lot about that. And that's about the extent of it that I really, really, truly
Okay.
know. Anyway, because that's so apparent, I kind of thought, oh, well, they'll probably have someone playing clave. And what they did is one of the guys, I think he was a lot of times the lead singer, he would do it with his hand. So he would kind of cup one hand and hit it with the other. Like he made a little circle almost with his
Oh,
hand,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
like a
like
fist.
mhm.
And then the open part of the fist, kind of where his index finger and his thumb are, he would slap it with his hand and it made a little pop kind of sound. And it sounded kind of like that.
Mhm.
And I've seen them twice in concert. The first time they had a little microphone on his mic stand that was right by there. So they could
Ah,
mic it, the little pop, 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 pop. The whole time he's singing like a lead vocal or he's doing another percussion part
yeah.
with his mouth, but he's keeping that rhythm the whole time. And then the second time I saw him, they had advanced a few years. He had a lavalier mic, so he was wireless. So had a little pack on his back by his in-ear monitors, and then the microphone cable ran all the way up his back, down his shoulder, down his arm, and was taped on his wrist. So
Oh,
when he did that,
interesting.
so that way the sound engineer could make that sound exactly as loud as it needed to be in
Oh,
the mix. But the basic thing was they would sing their parts, and then even in between singing some kind of bop 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 bop, there'd be a bop 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 bop. I'm making something up, but there'd be like a bop bit bop whatever. There'd be a rhythm, bonk bonk whatever. Those are none of the sounds on this album. It'd be something like that. Sometimes they'll integrate it into their vocal part where it's a very simple little thing, but all of them doing it has this cacophony of
yeah, yeah,
rhythm
yeah.
and sound. So it really did sound, not to be cliche, it sounded just like the album in concert. It really did. Just amazing.
Yeah, one of the things that I found really interesting about this track, and especially in a lot of Latin music, the rhythmic instruments that they use are tonal, but they are not tuned to the actual piece. And so that off tuning and the consistent off tuning is what I find interesting about what they're doing here, especially the clave that you were talking about, because I heard that clave and it was off tune the same way that I would normally expect like an instrumental off tune to be as well. So it
Right.
was amazing to me because I think as vocalists, a lot of time we tend to snap to what is in tune and that we expect that it is in tune. And so hearing it out of tune and hearing it out of tune in a way that is authentic to the original style of music was for me that extra bit of delight.
Yeah, I think that's probably the key is that because all of them have played in bands that play this music. So they know exactly what it sounds like. So they know that as the key of the song moves around, their shakers and clave don't change keys. They have a certain sound. And so I think they naturally do that instead of naturally tune because it's in their musical heritage to have that sound. So it wouldn't even occur to them to try to make it be in tune. It would sound weirder to them. So it would be very natural for them to have it be this consistent pitch that often falls, maybe sometimes happens to fall in, but often falls outside of the key center that's happening otherwise.
So to follow up on that, I think that there are areas where I heard tuning that was very specific to Latin music, and especially in the male voices. So there were certain areas, especially in the parts where it was actually supposed to sound like voices. So the background voices, the tuning of these specific voices for me, not just because they were singing in Spanish, but they really sounded like a lot of the different Central American, Caribbean, South American vocals that you will hear and the blend that they have, which I think is different than the blend that we hear out of traditional choral music or even some of the gospel music that we've been listening to as well. Each of those has a certain blend of voices that we kind of expect. And the blend of these male voices really brought to mind the kind of harmonies that I expect to hear out of this region as well. Is that something that you heard?
Yeah, absolutely. I've often said, really, for them, as much as it's just outside of our particular American heritage music tradition ears, this is much to them as an American group of six guys making a doo-wop album. We don't have to think about how those chords happen, who's voicing what. It's matter of fact for us. To me, this album, as much as, of course, it's air quotes foreign to my ear necessarily, I'm assuming to them, growing up in this culture, studying this music in university there, this isn't anything fancy at all. This is just a very matter of fact. That's why it sounds so authentic, because it is authentic. They know these kinds of songs. Even when they're writing original songs, they're in the vein and the style and the feel and the tonalities of the music they grew up with. It's from their region.
So the point I was trying to make about this was much more along the lines of the different type of blend that we expect out of different types of groups. So even with an American music tradition, you have your barbershop, for instance, you have country, you have doo-wop, you have all of these different vocal traditions that we have here inside of the United States, and each one sounds slightly different. I think part of it is the type of vowels that you use, and so depending on what region you're from, you learn how to speak in a very particular way. And I think in this particular way as well, there is a certain type of blend that comes from the way that people speak and the way that people learn how to sing. To your point, I think that it is very cultural as well. And this is just the point that I'm trying to make because I hear something very familiar, also being steeped in a lot of different types of, Central American, South American music. Where growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area, you're just kind of surrounded by this music, right?
Right.
So I think for me, it sounds very familiar. But what I was trying to comment on is the tone of the voices and the blend that is very specific to the style of music is different than the styles of music that we might be more familiar with in a North American context, singing in English.
Very true.
So let's change topics a little bit. One of the things that I really wanted to think about were the lyrics, which were in Spanish. It
Right.
is a super cute song. And the reason I say that is that it seems to me like it's an introductory song where it goes through every single person inside of the group and talks about what things that they do. The kinds of things that I have heard in some pieces of groups that I know here singing in English, where basically they reference each one of the band members and the things that they do and give them an opportunity to shine as well. Can you talk a little bit about the role of that type of piece inside of a repertoire?
Well, I will let you know just how much you nailed the translation of it, because not only did they add a translation, but at the beginning of every song here in the liner notes, it just tells you a little story if there's an anecdote about it or there's a little bit written about it. And in this one, it says, this son, and S-O-N is how that's spelled, son, which is the feel. That's what the music is. It's not a salsa or merengue. It's a son. This song serves as our calling card. It introduces the members of the group and shows which instruments we play. There's an old-fashioned Cuban proverb which says that when something is good, the wind cannot carry it away. How about that? So, yeah, you were spot on. That's exactly the thing. Serves as their calling card. So, yeah, as an opening song on the opening album that they put out, and just as a fun way to introduce the band and the show, sometimes a group will just have, oh, here's the band intro. And sometimes literally it gives everyone a break from music and everyone either introduces themselves or every band member introduces a different band member or the lead singer introduces everyone in the band. And sometimes they'll get a little more cutesy with it and have a little introductory song, whether they have a little groove they like to play or they have their favorite little cover and they use it as a bed to be the song that they play while they introduce each other. And sometimes they work out a whole thing into the song, of course, very much playing to the a cappella presentation here. they do exactly that, kind of talking about here are all the members of the group, and it goes through each one and the instruments that they air quotes play. So yeah, you're right on. It's a cool original song, but introduces everyone to the group.
In talking about their history, as it references, hey, we started in 1989. This particular song was recorded and released in 1995. So at this point in time, they'd obviously been together for quite some time.
Different anecdotes I remember them saying, and then isn't a lot of their press materials, lots of bios that you hear about them is when they're at university and at almost like a party trick. Like if they were all at the same party, they could imitate with their voices some of the music they'd played. I'm totally, of course, speculating, but I'd imagine, oh, you guys are all in that band in school. It's too bad here at the party we can't have the full band all set up, oh, no, it goes like this or whatever. Eventually, it was like a little party trick that they had, but then they were being told and realizing themselves that it was actually a pretty cool thing. And people weren't really believing that it was just them when they would hear it. They were kind of amazed by the sounds they could come up with and how full it could all be. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was wondering, what does Montuno stand for? Because it wasn't a familiar term for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I looked it up. Montuno means of the mountains, but it's also the foundational rhythm of salsa, or probably of son in this case, because son is a predecessor or an ancestor of salsa. So I just thought it was interesting that they refer to themselves as sampling repeatedly inside of the song. So this is Montuno Sampling. So I thought that was super cute.
And oftentimes the piano player and or the bass player, if you tell them it's like, oh no, it's a Montuno, there's certain rhythms that the left hand will play or both hands will play, but definitely the left or the bass, if there's a bass player, they understand what that means. Generally, it's not playing the downbeats. It's usually playing just off of the downbeats.
Yeah, it is really interesting also for me to think about. So, as we wrap up this section, I really want to think about the relationship that we have to Cuban music in general and just the influence that it's had in American music. And a big part of that, I think, also has to do with the history of Cuba and the historical relationship between the United States and Cuba. Going back to, Prohibition times, you're talking the 1920s, I was reading that Havana was a pretty big destination. The relationship between Cuba and the United States was so big, like tourism was such a big thing at that point in time. And then in our lifetimes, thinking about the strained relationship that these two countries have, the closing of the borders, the way that a lot of people fled from Cuba and settled inside of the United States, and what that diaspora had to contribute, thinking about the relationship with jazz and thinking about how deeply Cuban music was integrated with jazz music. So I was reading how Dizzy Gillespie integrated Cuban musicians inside of his act and the influence that they had in his work as well. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Oh, well, yeah, the contributions by Dizzy going in there, and there are many Cuban artists who have had a big role, a big influence in jazz. The story I did want to tell you that related to being closed off from the States was that first time that I did hear them, one of the a cappella summits that would happen in San Francisco, kind of opposite time of the year from when the Harmony Sweepstakes competition would be, big concert, celebration of a cappella groups, and it would be kind of a little bit of everyone, a who's who. This particular show was probably 97-ish, and it featured rockapella kind of at the height of their powers. A newly signed to a record label, House Jacks, hosted the show, and the Swingle Singers were on that show, and this group from Cuba, Vocal Sampling. So what I found really interesting is very much at these kinds of shows during the day, there are some meet the artist sessions and some things like that. And usually the main guest artists, unless they're the ones that are answering questions or giving some kind of talk or topic, usually not to be found. They're chilling out, waiting for their night to perform and waiting for their sound check, etc. But what I loved was the unknown quantity of vocal sampling that most of us that are into it had heard this album, and it was amazing. But again, as we've mentioned, you can kind of do anything on an album. What does this sound like live? And nobody had heard them in person. It's not like, oh yeah, they get to my part of the country a lot. They just hadn't come to the country at all. Matter of fact, I'm pretty sure that up to like even the week before, the organizers weren't even sure they were going to be allowed to appear. This is how long ago it was. Acapella fans flooded the State Department with faxes just to make sure that they made their appearance and to say how important and how innocuous this appearance would be.
Wow.
And sure enough, they were there. And so at noon or whatever, there was just to meet the artist in this room, and it was packed. And along the walls, I'm seeing all the members of all the quote unquote important groups that were performing that night. Everyone was there like, no, we're not going to miss this. Like, this doesn't come to our country at all, let alone right here at the same festival as us. We need to check this out. And I remember from the first 30 seconds, just the whole place absolutely in awe. Just everyone like, whoa. Like I said, this sounds like that record they made. Holy cow.
Yeah.
How do they do it? And so I'll never forget that. And of course, the concert that night was amazing. But even in that more specific, where it's not a lot of time to sound check, not a lots of bells and whistles, just turn on some mics, sing a couple of things. They had a translator that kind of spoke for them, and when they were telling their story about how they started. And that's one of those that I'll never forget. Just the vibe of the whole room, knowing we're at a special event that may never happen again in the States. I don't know how much more they ever play. And the show that night, actually, the thing that I remember is with all that vocal percussion stuff, all of the Latin percussion stuff, their second to last tune right in that ballad spot, they did indeed do this beautiful ballad with no kind of rhythmic stuff in it at all. And it was just like, oh, they don't need the trickery of all that stuff. They can do it. They could just do a whole show of jazz ballads if they wanted to. It was amazing. It was great.
What a special memory. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. I
Yeah. It
totally
was,
This was way before my time, and so it's great to hear just how special it was and that you had an opportunity to see them all. So anything else that you wanna share before we move on?
no, but if you like it at all, check out anything else from them. All the rest of that album and their subsequent albums are also stellar.
Awesome, and so with that, we're gonna move on to that's right, the mailbag. And you can get a hold of us via email at themusiciansloop, that is LOUPE at gmail.com, or you can contact us via Instagram or threads at themusiciansloop.
And that's a great opportunity for you to tell us maybe if you happen to see vocal sampling at some point in your life, or a group that is like them, or your first a cappella group like that where you were just watching them and most of the show you were just freaking out because you couldn't believe they were doing all of that. Or any other questions you might have related to this, or how you find their music, or just any other comments you might have, please send them there.
Awesome. So this week's mailbag is from Threads. It's from an account called Ms. Instrumental, MS Instrumental, from December of 2025. And it says, "Hi, musicians. Please don't let the rise of AI usage in music discourage you from singing, rapping, songwriting, producing, practicing, performing, creating, experimenting, or just trying in general. FYI, this is an anti AI post. I'm pro technology and pro innovation. Just saying, if you genuinely enjoy making music, please keep making it. Immerse yourself in discovery and into the process of creation. There are still so many people who'd enjoy hearing or experiencing your art." And there's a couple of
Mm.
emoji afterwards. We haven't talked as much about the rise of AI, even though everyone is talking about it right now, and the impact of AI in the music industry. I'd love to hear a little bit of your thoughts, especially when it comes in response to this particular person's encouragement to continue to make music, even in more analog ways, or perhaps especially in analog ways.
I'm in agreement with that particular thread. And I think it's a bit different and a little too simplistic, but I'll use it anyway. Things that I've often heard in these conversations. At some point, the drum machine was going to ruin music. At some point, multi-track recording was going to ruin music. At some point, just the Beatles' existence was going to ruin music. So we go through history, and there's always the "this is going to ruin music." I'm definitely a glass half full guy, but the optimist in me believes in the humans. Maybe less and less every day, but I still do believe in them, and that the originality that comes from us, the algorithms and the AI stuff pulls from stuff that exists already, doesn't usually create, although I'm sure that's coming. It doesn't create necessarily in a way that humans would, and do odd things that maybe even other humans wouldn't do, let alone a program. So I guess that's part of my hope. And again, much like, oh no, the drum machine's going to, but well, they didn't put drummers out of business. They became an important part of a lot of different music, but you just had to shift, and there's been some great things that have happened because of them. So I guess that's just my only hope, is that really creative people can use, like they've always used, same with synthesizers. Oh my goodness, synthesizers are going to ruin music. So yeah, I guess I'm in agreement. I get that way too. Even just, why write a song when this other thing exists that's writing all these great songs? You don't need any more from me. Or why do your own whatever when this other stuff is so great? And so it's easy to get bogged down in that. And now it's, well, why try to work my tail off to create this thing when some people can just feed a couple things into some AI and it'll spit out something better than I could ever do? That's just not true. It doesn't have your heart. It doesn't have your innovation, your thoughts, your feelings that somebody needs or wants to hear. So I think that hopefully should forever be a thing that is needed, humans communicating with others through art.
Yeah, I love that you put it that way, because I think I resonate with that in the way that I think about a relationship with technology. And there are two different examples that I have in mind. One of them is social media, and I see a pendulum swing that is happening in culture. 20 years ago, social media was brand new. It had a lot of opportunities for us to connect with people. But more and more today, I see a generation of people just stepping away from social media and prioritizing in-person relationship and in-person conversation, really biasing towards stepping away from this digital connectedness into an in-person connectedness. And I see that we value that more because the digital connectedness is so cheap. And here's another example. Some people may know this, but I'm a fiber crafter, and so that means that I knit and crochet. So in a world of mass manufacturing where someone can get a sweater just off the rack for 20 bucks. Now, I can go out and buy something and I can give it to a friend. But if I knit something for them and give it to them, it inherently has more value. It has more value because I have created this thing. I've put in the time. I've brought my own craftsmanship. And so I think that there is an opportunity for us to think about, in a world where digital tools are making it so much easier and more accessible, how much more are we going to value the actual skills that go into it? And so I really go back to the whole mass manufacturing thing of clothing. And I just think about how much joy I bring whenever I make a baby item for a friend. And they are absolutely blown away when they receive something that is handcrafted, whether it's a quilt or it's a sweater or it's a blanket or something like that. It is something that is incredibly meaningful for them. And I think reinforces our relationship in a way that buying something off the rack would not, no matter how much I spent.
Absolutely.
One other thing that I'm thinking about right now is the relationship that we have to live music as opposed to recorded music. We both have experiences listening to music with other people as a social thing, and live music also fits into that social experience.
Well, caveat being, I live in Los Angeles, so it's very easy for me to say, oh, go experience live music as much as possible. There's more here than I could ever even get to. I've noticed I really try to focus on doing that. I try to go to one or two performances from the LA Phil. The Walt Disney Concert Hall is just an acoustic marvel. So hearing these great works of music in this beautiful space and just hearing it amazingly well and getting to experience it live and see those 60 to 100 humans doing this together and creating this one sound is just really, really moving.
So, any last thoughts before we move on?
That's it.
Okay. And so, with that, we have a big request of all of you. If you enjoyed this episode or any of the other ones that we have released, please share it with a friend. We are always looking for more listeners. We're looking to grow our listener base. And we know that you, as music lovers, will know the right people to share it with.
And even check out, we're going to be making playlists on all the platforms that we have provided links on. And so you can share even the whole playlist. Hey, here's this podcast I listened to. Here's a list of the songs. If you see one that you want to check out, then you can come back to the podcast and see what we have to say about it. Let us know. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Awesome. See you all next week.
And as every a cappella group mentions at some point, it's nice to not have to schlep everything around. And then when you do it really professionally, you end up schlepping a bunch of stuff around just to pay you back for having said that.
I also figure out that I actually use that phrase a lot too.
Celebration, come on,
All right.
like,
Yeah.
whatever.